Welcome to our virtual panel presentation for the new TV series based on Stephen King's The Stand. I'm Anthony Breznican of Vanity Fair, and it was my pleasure to publish a first look at the show this summer. And now we have this virtual presentation at the New York Comic Con featuring some of the very large cast. So I'm going to jump right into it. The show debuts on December 17th on CBS All Access with 9 episodes and a new coda written by Stephen King. We all know and love this book. We've all read it multiple times. Some of us own multiple copies of the same book. And it has never stopped terrifying and unsettling people over the course of more than 4 decades now. Of course, it's especially on people's minds today. And we're going to talk all about that with our guests. So please let me begin by introducing Benjamin Cavell and Taylor Elmore.
Yay!
Hello.
Woo! Virtual applause. Whoopi Goldberg, who plays Mother Abigail. James Marsden, who's Stu Redmond.
Hey.
Greg Kinnear, who is Glenn Bateman. Jovan Adepo, who is the budding musician Larry Underwood. Amber Heard, who is Nadine Cross. Owen Teague, who plays Harold Lauder. And Odessa Young, who plays Franny Goldsmith, who just has the fate of the entire future of the human race resting on her shoulders. So thank you all for joining us here. I guess I'll begin with Benjamin and Taylor. The book has been loved for decades now and cherished and reimagined in different ways. So what was your approach in telling the story anew?
Whenever you're adapting a masterpiece and an iconic piece of fiction, there's a lot of pressure to sort of do right by it. Part of, I think, why Stephen King is the most successful, influential American author since Mark Twain is that he, no matter in some way how fantastical his stories are or how supernatural, they're so grounded in reality in the sense that he seems to be able to anticipate how people will react. Certainly, we did not make this show in response to COVID. We were making it long before 2018. We wrote most of it, and we finished on March 12th before anyone knew what COVID would really become. I think it's a testament to how universal the book is and how prescient it is that it really does seem to have resonance with the way the world has responded.
Getting a chance to kind of update some of the not tropes, but things that are 40 years old that you come across in the book. Getting a chance to sort of update that with a little more of a modern lens and looking at the world like it is now, not like it was in 1978. Those gave a lot of opportunities to just deepen characters and cast differently, cast against type and stuff like that. It was just a really fun opportunity to explore.
With the effects we have now, with the freedom that we have on streaming, it felt like this was the time to tell this story again.
Well, let's talk about good and evil. One of the people who helps lead the survivors of this plague just for rebuilding their society is Mother Abigail, played by Whoopi. And I'm in a group that's rereading the novel right now for a podcast. And one of the things that struck us is we often remember Mother Abigail as this sort of mystical figure who appears to people in dreams, a kind of modern prophet. In rereading it, the most important thing about her is that she is a very old lady. She's, I think, 108 years old, and she remembers a time before all of the modern technologies that we rely on. So Whoopi, was that something that was on your mind as you brought Mother Abigail to life?
No, because she's not, we're not in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And so the world of Mother Abigail in the 70s minus the 100 would be very different, I think, than now. So what Mother Abigail recognizes is that change comes all the time. It's a constant. It's the one thing that you always know is going to be there. So that when she is sort of awakened in her, her divineness, when it comes, she's like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And then she forgets that she's not God. She's the messenger. you know, and it's something that happens to people, you know. Power can sometimes make your mind think that you're in charge. And that's kind of the thing she has to figure out. How do I do this and not make it about me leading the people, but making it about me through God leading the people where they need to go, you know. Very different from the person she's going up against, because he does think he's God.
What was it you felt had to change about her in order to make her, you know, the 2020 Mother Abigail as opposed to the late 1970s Mother Abigail?
Well, she couldn't be the magic Negro. We couldn't have that. You know, that was fine 40 years ago, you know, but she had to be a real person. She had to be, I think, you had to be able to feel her. You had to know her. You had to understand from where she was coming from, why she made the choices she made, how she thought she was supposed to do things. And then when she discovers that she may have made a mistake and may have, you know, done the wrong thing, she has to like deal with all of that. So I needed her not to be the little old black lady, you know, who has all the magic information. She doesn't. She's hopeful that she's right, but she's not positive. She's told everybody where to come, how to meet her. And then it's like, but now what? And then God stops, you know, communicating. So it becomes this whole other conversation in her head. But her exterior is, listen, I got this. I got this, trust me.
You mentioned the opposite side of her. Flip side of Mother Abigail is, of course, Randall Flagg, played by Alexander Skarsgård. He's not with us today, but Ben and Taylor, maybe you could talk to us about your version of Randall Flagg.
Even though obviously the book is about good and evil, that we not be sort of making the characters who follow one or the other kind of cartoonishly one thing or the other. It was very important to make Flagg seem like a viable option, you know, that is, seem like somebody who one could imagine people following.
You couldn't ask for a more beautiful Randall Flagg than Alexander Skarsgård.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for us, Flagg in the book represents sort of almost like American rock and roll version of the devil. He's just a beautiful example of a person. Like you want to listen to what he has to say. You want to believe what he has to say. A version of Mother Abigail and Flagg, you know, facing off at in some level. That's a very exciting, you know, prospect for us.
Well, I want to open it up to the rest of the cast and talk about who it is they play and what that person becomes in this new decimated world. Let's start with James. Tell us about Stu Redman. He's a good old boy from Texas.
Yeah, so Stu Redman comes from small town Texas, working class guy, very simple, doesn't talk a lot, but he's got a strong sense of morals. I think he has very strong opinions on what is right and wrong. And he's found himself smack dab in the middle of it all when the outbreak occurs. And unbeknownst to him, he's one of the very few who are immune to this virus. And he is one of the few who start to see Mother Abigail in his dreams, and chooses to make his journey to Boulder, where he meets the other survivors who have chosen to go to Boulder and not to Vegas. I think he's got a very rigid sense of morals. I think he's a level-headed human being who speaks only when he needs to, and when he speaks, there's real purpose behind it. And I think it makes him a natural leader. Which is why I think one of the reasons why he becomes one of the leaders of the Free Zone in Boulder. He believes in rebuilding the society and letting goodness and kindness and all those virtues kind of lead the way.
Odessa, Franny learns she's pregnant just as the Captain Trips virus hits the world.
Wouldn't that suck?
Everything is changing for her anyway, and then it changes even more dramatically. How does she face it?
Yeah. I think Franny, kind of when we meet her before the world kind of falls apart, she's definitely on this brink of adulthood, and then when everything falls apart, she really has to kind of dive into the deep end with that. You know, she's she's a pregnant college student at the start of it. She doesn't know how she's going to get her life together. She doesn't know what she's going to do with the baby. She's just barely told her father. And then her hard decisions that she was going to have to make all of a sudden become a lot harder. And I think that kind of carries through throughout the goings on of trying to figure out how to handle a new world and how to rebuild and who to trust and who not to trust and who to be around is this girl who's kind of caught in the crossfires of youth and needing to kind of hold everything together. She recognizes pretty early on that her position in the world as perhaps the first and only pregnant person is pretty symbolic.
What's kind of interesting about Franny is while all of the other characters have lost everyone else in their lives that they know, she actually is one of the few who actually knows another survivor, but he's like not somebody she particularly likes.
Hey, Owen.
Hi, Odessa.
Tell us about the relationship between these two.
So Harold and Fran grew up together, and she was his babysitter from the time he was a small kid. Harold's sister Amy was Fran's best friend back in normal life. And so when the plague hits, it's kind of everybody dies in Ogunquit, Maine, except for Harold and Fran. And Harold's been in love with her his entire life. Harold's tough. He's been bullied and kind of just treated very badly all his life, by his parents, by his sister, by people at school. It's not that he doesn't have empathy, it's that he's just he hasn't had a lot of practice using it. And so he's so caught up in this shell of just anger and pain that he's kind of built around himself. There's this Harold that can leave it all behind and start fresh with this plague and with this new world, or there's this Harold that can carry that all with him. And that's kind of the choice that he has to make.
Jovan, Larry Underwood, I've always thought of him and Harold as being linked in some strange way because Larry is also struggling with this idea of, am I a good guy? Am I a nice guy? And he's not necessarily at the beginning of the story. Tell us about Larry and where he is in life when life takes a turn.
Yeah, I think Larry is one of those guys that you meet where he could be incredibly charming and there's so many favorable characteristics about him, and you're kind of confused as to why he isn't more successful in different facets of his life. And it's just the fact that he has this problem with his ego in which he seems to not be able to get out of his own way. But to kind of piggyback off of what James was saying, I feel like he is like Stu in that he has opinions, but he has the opinions without the morals. I think he wants to do the right thing if he can, but he just doesn't know how to get out of his own way. And, I had conversations with Taylor and Ben and even Josh about the type of guy that Larry is and how close we were going to stick to the book. And I just really appreciated that they allowed me to kind of put my own spin on Larry. And, I wanted to at least have some similarities to the book because, fans will kind of butcher you if you just completely turn your back on them. So I never had any intentions to do that, but I definitely wanted to represent him in the best way I felt I could because Larry's black in this world. so that's his rock and roll, baby, can you dig your man has got to be how I feel.
So Amber, Nadine Cross is another character who's really teeter-tottering between right and wrong in her own heart. And she's someone who gets kind of a choice. Tell us about where she is as we meet her at the beginning of the story and what it is that's driving her.
Well, we meet Nadine when she is on the road. She is like everyone post, pandemic, post trips. People are kind of in a state of wandering and receiving, information from the very changed world around them and from maybe a bit of divine intervention, who knows. And we meet her like everyone else, lost and trying to kind of literally and figuratively figure out her way and her place in the world. And but Nadine is unique in her history. She has a long history with Flag in ways that are not very clear and difficult to explain, but it's that sort of kind of grooming of a relationship and her as a human that makes her decisions ultimately represent the opposite side of what a lot of our hero characters face and ultimately choose, one side or the other. They choose good. I represent a character who is struggling very much to be able to choose that way because I think Nadine represents the selfish interests. She functions with the almost, with the goals that she has as a person. How does she save herself or her own motivations in this, and in doing so and having that kind of focus, she represents the other side of the kind of more selfless, how do we save each other mentality that so many of the other characters ultimately and thankfully choose.
Greg Kinnear, you play Glenn Bateman. And what I find interesting about Glenn is when I interviewed King about the book in the new series a few months ago, Glenn was the character he singled out as the person he put in the book to express his views about what society means. Like, he's like King's philosopher alter ego. Tell us about what you brought to Glenn and what kind of person you think he is now that he's facing this, this devastated world.
It was really fun to play this guy. He's a former sociology professor. He's very wordy. He's very thoughtful, and he's a bit of a poet about all of the things going on.
Here we go.
Oh, man.
It's true, Marsden. It's true. He has philosophies that are being born on the spot, and he's sharing philosophies that he's carried around in his back pocket his whole life. And as an actor, to play a guy who actually studies human behavior, it's kind of a gift. He's getting to kind of look around at the circumstances very, very clear-eyed, but he's also somewhat cynical, and he's also I think slightly untrusting of what's going on, but I think he's intrigued by the ride. It's interesting because when a crisis happens for most people, they're living their lives, crisis happens, and it's just everything comes to a stop. And here was a guy whose life had already stopped. He was in retirement. He's living out in the woods with his dog Kojak. His wife's passed away, and this crisis comes. And that's really when Glenn Bateman's story begins. And I felt like, the ride was very linear. It was just one event after another that he's taking in and getting to explore it. And I think a kind of a reawakening for the guy. Yeah, that's interesting about Stephen because, he's such an extraordinary writer. He's so eloquent. He's and I do think with Glenn, he kind of you can feel that muse of his.
When I spoke with Stephen King himself for the first look story we did, we talked about the fact that the title of this story is The Stand, not the plague, not the end of the world, something devastating like that. And it was funny because he said, I always thought they would pressure me to change that title because it's kind of boring. But he really believed in the idea of this being a story that isn't just about the pandemic, isn't just about the Captain Trips flu virus, but is about what people do when all the rules of the world are stripped away, when society is stripped away, when our responsibilities are stripped away. Do we still honor them?
King was clear with me from the beginning that he doesn't really think of the story as a story about a plague. He's said many times that this was his attempt to do his Lord of the Rings in America and to have this sort of huge world for his characters to wander through. The plague is the mechanism by which the world becomes a big empty place. but it really is about the struggle between good and evil that comes afterward. That's what the story's been about for him, and that's what the story's been about, I think, for all of us.
People like to confront their fears, and if this is something that just happens to have coincided with a real-world event, it's interesting how people are not rejecting The Stand or Outbreak or Contagion. They're drawn to it because they're getting a little bit of strength from it, and I think that's sometimes a positive thing. Maybe that's the role that scary stories play in our existence and in our psyches. Well, Whoopi, Mother Abigail leads the way, so I wanted to throw to you. I understand you have a clip or some footage or maybe a surprise to...
Well, it's going to be a surprise to, I think, everyone sitting here right now, but we wanted to offer fans a little sneak peek at what we've been up to and what The Stand really has to say in the first volley that we're offering of The Stand. I hope y'all are really excited because we're excited to give it to you.
Singing, don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing gonna be alright.
I'm scared.
Me too.
Where will we go?
Singing, don't worry.
Welcome to the Boulder Free Zone. Stu Redmond. Which one of you is Larry Underwood?
How do you know who I am?
How do you think?
Mother Abigail?
All I know is that we dreamed of her and she was real. She brought us all together to keep us safe in these uncertain times.
This is my message to you.
I am in the way of knowing things. I know you feel him.
Calls himself the Dark Man. Mostly I just see his wolf.
Mother Abigail told us that there are two sides to the world. There's the good, and then there's a deep well of darkness.
Ollie, up, set him free. Come on, run on home with me. Boom.
In the world that was, they told you it was wrong, want more. Their time is at an end. Our time has begun.
There's bitter days ahead. Death and terror. The Dark Man grows stronger every day. And soon he'll destroy all who stand against him. So the world is now a blank page. And it is there. You must make your stand.
The Stand, which premieres December 17th exclusively on CBS All Access. I want to thank the wonderful creators and cast for joining us today. Benjamin Cavell, Taylor Elmore, Whoopi Goldberg, James Marsden, Greg Kinnear, Jovan Adepo, Amber Heard, Owen Teague, and Odessa Young. Thanks a lot for being with us, guys, and everybody stay safe, all right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure.
Hi, everybody.
Hi,
Everybody,
guys.
miss you guys.
Bye.
Much
Miss
love.
you.
Bye.